From San Francisco, it's Injured on the Job, the only place on television where you'll get the truth about the workers' compensation system in California. And now, here are your hosts.
Good evening. I'm the host, Steve Zeltzer, and tonight we're going to be looking at the story of Anita Blick. In California, under SB 899, which was a Senate bill, the workers' compensation system was deregulated, and tens of thousands of injured workers are facing severe hardship. Their medical payments aren't being taken care of, and also they're forced to fight the doctors, to fight the insurance companies, and to fight the Division of Workers' Compensation to get proper treatment and representation. And alongside that, there's a commission called the Fraud Assessment Commission, which is chaired by a man named William Zachary, who is also vice chair for risk management of Safeway Incorporated. And they dispense $22 million a year to district attorneys in the state of California to prosecute insurance fraud. One problem that we have discovered is that the insurance fraud that they prosecute is not the insurance fraud of the insurance companies and insurance industry, but against injured workers. And tonight we're going to be speaking with a injured worker, Anita Blick, who has faced a retaliatory prosecution against her as a result of her injuries. And this case, I think, systemizes, in a systemic way, shows the problem that is going on in California today. So welcome to our show, Anita.
Thank you very much.
Anita, why don't you talk about what kind of work you did and how you got into your work?
I originally started out as an emergency medical technician and dispatcher for an ambulance company that is no longer in business called Mercy Peninsula Ambulance. When my kids started school, I knew I needed more money to raise them, so I went to work for the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office as a San Mateo County communications dispatcher for 11 and a half years. I started out as a trainee and worked my way up to supervisor. When I remarried my husband 15 years ago, I went to work at the town of Atherton as a dispatcher. I worked mostly the graveyard shift, which they had never had anybody that was willing to work it for any length of time. And I was perfectly glad to be there in the middle of the night.
So that was usually a quiet time.
It's not only a quiet time, it was a quiet town after dispatching for East Palo Alto and the sheriff's office. This was, like a vacation.
So this was a lot easier.
Not only was it much easier, but it was like a small family. It was a very nice place to work.
And Atherton, what kind of community is that?
It's one of the wealthiest municipalities in the country. It's a very old town. It's still very small, has very strict zoning and building laws, and it's a very, very wealthy community. So
multimillionaires and billionaires probably live in Atherton, and the titans of the electronic industry probably have their homes there.
People like the head of Dept, the head of Mervyn's, very old money. They've been there a long time.
So you're working for a city that is really one of the richest cities or towns in the world, probably. Probably,
yes.
Okay, so you were working as in this town as a dispatcher.
Yes.
And so how long did you work there?
From 1991 to 1997.
So what happened in 1993?
In 1993, part of my job was to maintain the 24-hour, at the time they were reel-to-reel tapes, large tapes, and they needed to be changed right after midnight when they clicked over so that you would always have a backup tape ready to go if you needed it, that taped all of the incoming calls and all of the radio traffic. And the 911 phone rang while I was changing this 24-hour tape, and the floor had just been waxed, and I slipped, and I knew the floor had just been waxed, but in my hurry to get to the 911 phone, which The standard is that it's never supposed to ring more than 3 times. You don't know what's on the other end and if the person can hold for 5 rings. So in theory, you should never let a 911 phone ring more than 3 times.
That's the rule.
That's the rule. That's the goal. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's the goal. And you do everything in your power to make that happen. I slipped on the waxed floor. I had been squatting down at the lower tape, changing it when the phone rang. My foot slipped out from under me, and because I was halfway squatting, I landed with all my weight on my right knee.
And what happened?
It hurt like the dickens. And we were shorthanded that night, so I asked the guys at work to go out and get me ice from Safeway. I packed my knee in ice, and I finished my shift.
So even though you were injured, you were conscientious, and you said, I'm going to finish my shift. And
they said that I could go home if I was too badly hurt, but I knew that it would be a crisis for them. They would have to call Menlo to ask for help, and
because they were short-staffed, they didn't have enough people
right.
to have.
There were only 2 other people on that night anyway.
I see.
So one of them would have had to work the desk, and the other one would have had to take calls by himself, which is never safe. Okay,
so you went home, and then you went to the doctor?
No, I went home, packed it in ice, stayed off it for a while, and thought it would. We've all been hurt before, and we know it hurts at the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a chronic problem. I assumed that being healthy and hearty and athletic, that it would just go away in time.
I see.
But it didn't. A couple of months later, I slipped and fell again. Same knee. This time I was coming out of a chair to go answer the 911 phones. That's how dispatchers get hurt, is the 911 phone.
Why don't they put it closer to where you're sitting, or is that?
There's a telephone in the comm center and one at the back of the station as a backup phone, but that wasn't ever where I was when I had a problem.
So you were out and about and around. And
you carry a portable radio.
And then you just went to the phone.
And you just go to the phone when it rings.
So when you first fell, did you file a workers' comp claim?
I filed a claim that said that I had been injured.
You did file a claim that you'd been injured when you first fell.
But I didn't go to the doctor.
You didn't go to the doctor. And what happened the second time? You fell again on that same knee?
Second time again, I fell again on the same knee, and this time I went to Stanford emergency room. One of the officers took me. My knee had swelled up very, very badly, and I was in incredible pain. And so they took me by police car to Stanford ER.
And what happened there?
The emergency room doctor saw me, and he said, "This is the second time you've had a fall in the recent past." He said, take some anti-inflammatories, keep it nice, stay off it for a while. He gave me a pair of crutches and said, just stay off it for a while and try to take care of it.
Did they take any x-rays?
Yes, they did. It was not broken.
I see.
But x-rays don't show soft tissue damage.
I see.
And then I fell the third time, which was in January of 1990.
4?
4, yeah.
I see.
And that was the worst fall. So every time I fell, it progressively...
It got deteriorated.
Yes, and the pain increased, the swelling increased, and the length of time it took me to heal way increased.
So you had 3 falls on the same knee?
3 falls on the same knee in a relatively short amount of time. Mm-hmm. Within 6 months, I guess.
And what happened then?
On the 4th time, I went to Stanford, and they said, you've been in here now twice. In a relatively short amount of time, you need to see an orthopedic specialist. So I called the city's group up, which is the insurance company for the town of Atherton, the workers' comp insurance.
And that's the city's group?
The city's group in Burlingame.
I see.
And they sent me to Dr. Stephen Conrad, who at the time had an office in Half Moon Bay, but who is now only has the office in Daly City.
So this Stephen Conrad works for the city's group, and he provides medical care for injured workers in Daly City.
And he testified in court that 60% of his practice is workers' compensation.
So he's
cases.
Basically a company doctor.
Basically.
And what happened with him?
This is an ugly story. First we tried cortisone shots. That didn't work. Then we tried surgery. He did outpatient surgery, which is a procedure called a lateral release, I believe. And they disconnect the ligaments in the hope that they will reattach themselves and be stronger. And that was not only didn't work, it actually made me worse than what I had been before. Before, I had at least been able to hobble around and get to work.
So this exacerbated the problem.
Incredibly, and the pain was just hellacious. And I never ever got back to where I was before that first surgery, and still have not.
So that surgery was the wrong thing probably to do.
Probably. Then the first surgery was in July of 94, and the second surgery was in February of 95. This has been going on for years now, so I have a hard time remembering all the dates.
What was happening with your job at that time? You were on workers' comp at that time, or?
Yes.
I see. So it didn't get better?
No, it did not get better. The second surgery was a procedure, I've written it down for you. It's called a Ellesmere Trilliant, something like that.
So you had another surgery.
Second surgery. This was major surgery. I was in the hospital for the better part of, I think, 5 or 6 days. I was in a lot of pain. The procedure I found out at the trial, had been in use for about a dozen years. It had been a very successful surgery, and it was a common procedure, particularly on women who have more knee problems than men, for a dozen years. For reasons unbeknownst to me and not ever discussed with me, he decided to do a modified procedure. In the original procedure, they're supposed to cut a piece of the bone off the top of where your knee sits. They're supposed to shave the edge off the bone. They're supposed to pull the ligaments over, put the bone on top of it so that there's the bone, the ligament, and then the bone, your main tibia. And then they're supposed to put a screw through all three of those into the tibia. He never did that. What he did instead was he attached the ligament to soft tissue, sewed it up good and tight, and I was never asked if I wanted a modified procedure. It was never discussed with me. Even after the surgery, it was not told to me.
So he didn't really tell you what he was doing?
No.
He asked you about this particular
And even when
procedure.
it was clear that this had failed, and I said, why? Why has this not gotten better after 2 surgeries? He said, I don't know. I don't know.
So like it's out of his hands.
Yes.
It just didn't work.
Just didn't work.
So then what happened?
Well, I decided that after the third fall and after the third surgery, that I just couldn't live this way. I've been athletic and an outdoors person my entire life. I skied, camped, hiked, ran. I was a competitive swimmer. I lived outdoors. You know, my garden is my lifeline. And I could no longer do any of those things. Even to get in and out of the pool at this point, my husband had to help me get into the water and help me get out of the water. I couldn't even turn around at the end. I had to swim in circles because I couldn't tuck my feet up and push off. Couldn't do that. I couldn't even swim using a flutter kick because the wake from my other leg moved my injured leg so much
It was in pain.
that it caused great pain. So I would just use my upper arms. I thought, well, okay, I can't make my legs stronger now, but I can make my upper body stronger, which actually did help a lot because it helped me with the crutches as I became stronger with upper body strength.
Sure.
Because by now I had been, pretty much sitting on the couch for a year and a half. And I was gaining weight steadily. I got up to a total of 240 pounds, which certainly didn't help my health at all.
Sure.
And I decided, okay, I've had 2 surgeries. He says there's nothing else to do for me. I'd been through the rehab. It had not helped. It actually aggravated the problem. And now I know why it aggravated the problem. At the time, I didn't. Too much range of motion with this knee, and it still causes trouble. I'm fine as long as I work at a steady pace that's my own, which is kind of slow. Not way slow, but kind of slow. I walk at my own pace, and I have had to learn how to re-walk My stepmother, who did her master's dissertation on sports injuries, actually took videotape of me walking with my granddaughter. And we analyzed those films to see what was causing the problem. And the problem was that I was standing with my feet planted and then turning to the side to take her hand, or turning to the pivoting to pick something up. And it became clear that if I turn to my right, if I pivot on my right side, that my knee will fail regularly. And so I had to relearn how to walk straight ahead, keep my knees and my body in alignment. I can't reach to the side. I can't lean to the side. I can't twist. But if I keep my weight balanced straight over my knees and if I have to turn, you take little duck steps to the side. I'm strong. I've always been an athlete. I can lift an enormous amount of weight with my upper body. I could lift my granddaughter by bending at the waist and just deadlifting her straight up, because I am
So
strong.
you worked at getting better as best as you could.
Bought my own exercise equipment. I bought numerous canes when I was trying to transition off. That's another story. My husband fixed my garden so that everything was at a height that I could reach. He put all of the roses in half wine barrels. Even the small potted plants were set on upside down flower pots so that I didn't have to reach into the ground to get
So
them.
your garden was rearranged so you could
The
actually
whole
work on
house was rearranged. We ripped out the old bathroom. We completely redid the bathroom because, oddly enough, something stupid like brushing your teeth when you have to lean over the sink to wash your face and brush your teeth is difficult because you have the cabinets underneath there.
Sure.
You can't get your knees underneath there. So he ripped the whole thing out and redid it.
So then what happened after the failure of these operations and your effort to get better on your own?
My son had been working as a paramedic for AMR. And in his travels somewhere, he saw a device called a seat assist. It's basically like a pad, a pillow that sits on the chair, and it has a hydraulic lift in it that if you tip your weight forward, it pushes your bottom out of the chair, so you don't have to bend and struggle and lift. It also, when you sit down, I had always kind of fallen into chairs. I couldn't lower myself properly, so I would just kind of crash into chairs, which is not good either. So when you sit down on this, it just lowers you really gently.
So it helps you.
Takes a huge amount of stress off my knees, and I immediately knew within a month that this device was going to make a huge difference. And so I contacted the woman who was the communications supervisor. Her name was Pilar Ortiz Buckley, and told her, I can come back to work. I think I can even come back to work full time. Let me start out slowly. Let me work up. They had an opening that was a crisis for them. There was a position available.
And you wanted to go back to work.
I had wanted to go back to work. It's on record since 1999 that I wanted to go back to work.
You basically wanted to get well, go
Yes.
back to work, and continue your work career.
I would give anything if I could magically make my knee problems go away. It's made me an old lady overnight, and it's no fun.
So what did she say?
She said, oh yeah, I'll talk to the acting chief of police and run it by him and see if he's willing. And we need somebody, and I'm fully trained. All they have to do is just plug me in.
Sure.
And my husband, who was then still alive, was the trainer. So, all I would have had, whatever I needed to know, he would have been able to even bring me up to speed at home. I would be ready to go.
Sure.
On whatever had changed in the interim. And so the chief of police, Chief Brown Taylor or Taylor Brown, I'm not sure. I never met the man. Said, yeah, start seeing what you can do to hire her. Go for it. It's an easy fix. And Lieutenant Glenn Nielsen said, uh-oh, don't do that. This is being handled by the insurance company. Don't even call her back, which Pilar thought was kind of a rude way to treat me since I was obviously acting in good faith.
Sure.
So she basically told me that they weren't going to be able to hire me, that they had said that. I also, at the same time, Xeroxed for Dr. Conrad all the information about the Seat Assist. And I told him, I believe that this device will allow me to go back to work. I also Xeroxed that same information and sent it to the cities group, who had it logged in on their own computers, that I had sent them this. I not only just sent it to them, I called them on the phone.
So you wanted to let everyone know, I'm ready to go back to work, I can do the job.
I thought I had my bases covered. I had talked to the town of Atherton, I had talked to the insurance group, and I had talked to the physician. I don't know who else I was supposed to tell.
So then what happened?
Well, then sometime later, they took a bunch of videotape of me about 6 months later.
Where?
At my home in La Honda.
So you were still on workers' comp?
Yes.
And they were, in other words, they were spying on you?
Yes. And had been for quite a long time.
Were you aware of that?
No.
So they were taking videotape of you in your yard?
Yes. And also through the front window of my husband's mobile home.
And what were they trying to show?
They were trying to show that I was a liar, that I had defrauded them.
That you weren't...
That I wasn't as injured.
You didn't have disabled.
Yeah, that I wasn't injured.
So they wouldn't let you go back to work because of your disabilities.
Right.
That's on the one hand. On the other hand, they're trying to spy on you to say that you're lying.
Yes.
You know,
you would think it would have to be one way or the other.
Those seem contradictory, don't
yeah.
they? I mean, if you can't go back to work, then that would mean that they feel that you're disabled. And on the other hand, they're spending money hiring a detective to spy on you and videotape you. Now, what did they see in these videotapes, and what did they charge you with? I mean, what kind of work were you doing, or things that you were doing that they said were not proper?
The first set of videos they took was of me with my husband driving to the beach. He collected some rocks, put them in the back of his car. I stayed in the truck because I couldn't walk down the path to the beach. It happens to be my favorite beach, and I can't go there ever anymore. And I sat in the car and crocheted. You see me, you know, crocheting away. Crocheting the whole time he's down there. You know, when he brings the rocks up, I look at them and get back in the truck. Then they show us, after that, back at my house, taking those same small rocks out. My husband takes them out of the truck, which they don't really show, and lines them up on the railroad ties that go into the lower gate, the pedestrian gate. And he lines them up right on these railroad ties that make sort of an enclosed little garden patch. And I went over there and bent over. At one point, I kneeled down on my good knee and take these stones one by one and put them in place along the edge.
And we have a picture of some of these stones, these big stones that they...
All of these big stones can be lifted with one hand.
So this was the big stones that they said showed that you were faking it, basically.
Correct.
And so how much money or effort did they spend doing these videotapes?
Thousands of dollars. They had videotaped me years before that showed me on my crutches and my husband putting the groceries into the back of his truck. I'm on my crutches. They show me walking with my crutches.
And this is, you know, your injury.
Yes.
I mean, you had injuries. You had we have a picture of your leg.
Yes, we have a picture of my leg that certainly doesn't look normal to me. But beyond that, if I was never injured and faking it, then why did they do 2 surgeries on my leg?
That were ordered by the company doctor.
Yes.
This guy Conrad said that surgeries were required as a result of the injuries that you had.
2 of them.
And
so either he's incompetent or there's something wrong with this picture. Either way, I don't think that looks good for them.
So they were videotaping. What were they trying to do with these videotapes?
Accuse me of fraud, in workers' compensation insurance fraud.
So they said that you were lying to them. And what were the exact charges against you?
The first charge was grand theft, which is taking anything over $500. that you're not entitled to, and lying to get it. The second is insurance fraud, straight insurance fraud, which is the same basic thing, lying. It's just not about the money amount. It's about lying to get benefits that you're not entitled to. And the third one that they accused me of is kind of, and it is the one that they actually convicted me of. They said that I failed to tell the truth about something that was material to getting workers' compensation.
And what was that? What did they say that you'd failed to tell the truth about?
It turns out that they said that I failed to tell the truth about being able to drive again. I had not driven from the third fall in April 1996 till September of 2000. I never drove once. I just didn't think it was safe.
But you needed to drive where you live. You live out in the country.
Yes.
You're isolated there.
Yes.
It's hard to get to medical appointments or other
Yes.
things. You don't have anybody helping you. Your husband passed away.
Yes.
So you're pretty much, you have to get around.
You have to get around.
You have to get around.
So, and nobody would willingly take away their own driving privileges. It's awful. If you want to go anywhere, you have to ask somebody to take you.
That's right.
And like you said, I live in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty much an hour's drive from almost everywhere.
So you're in the boonies, and you really need to be able to drive.
Yes.
To where you go.
I didn't even drive during the '98 El Nino when my house flooded. I thought, oh great, I'll get, even if I can drive out of here, just put it in low and just drive, I'll probably, get stuck in a place where I can't walk.
Then you'd be stuck.
Then I'd be really stuck.
So this videotaping and this, it seems, intrusive videotaping, they were spying, whose land were they videotaping from?
The second batch of videotapes were taken of me and my granddaughter planting roses in the garden. The garden had been redesigned by my husband for me. All of the roses were in barrels. All of the pots were raised. All of the steps were mitigated so that they were not such a high step. They're all relatively small steps. He lowered the angle of the paths all around so that they weren't as steep.
So he basically had to rebuild your house and your property so you would be able to get around.
Everything.
Because of your disability.
We had to raise. I couldn't sleep in my own bed because I couldn't get into it. So we had a day bed, and we had my son's son-in-law, brother-in-law, come to the house and raise the bed so that I wouldn't have to bend, and that's my couch.
So they charged you, the district attorney of San Mateo, charged you with fraud. Now, had they tried before to go to the district attorney to prosecute you?
Yes, twice. Twice before, and twice it was turned down. The third time, a man by the name of Morley Pitts decided to prosecute me.
And Morley Pitts is a district attorney in San Mateo County.
That's my understanding.
Is that his specialty, insurance fraud?
I don't know.
I see.
I don't know.
So the third time they finally coerced or forced the district attorney to prosecute you, and you had a trial.
Yes.
And what happened at the trial?
The trial was 5 weeks long. Almost all of
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
And how much money did they say that were they charging you that you'd misappropriated or fraudulently got?
About $400,000.
$400,000. So the trial was 5 weeks.
That's not money that they gave me, by the way. That is money that they paid for private investigators and lawyers. They paid me very little money. They never even paid me at the proper rate.
$400,000 or $500,000 prosecuting you?
Spying on me and prosecuting me. The surgery and the rehab is a relatively small amount, and I don't think anybody would quit a $50,000, $60,000 a year job to make $198 a week. I mean,
that's what you were being paid, $198 a week.
Which, by the way, was below what I was supposed to be getting.